The next session is our regional showcase, where we are focused on Latin America. Very exciting, for us to kind of, focus in on the LATAM markets. For years we've seen kind of the momentum, and it really feels to us like we've hit a certain inflection point. As many brands are really looking at LATAM, in general, perhaps more specifically to certain markets. This session we're going to do slightly, differently. So one of our speakers, Blas Caraballo, the VP of Financial Services and Digital Payments at Walmart Mexico, was unable to, again, fly to New York. So what we did was we conducted a video interview. So I'm going to play this video interview. But before I do that, I want to thank, Indy Guha and the Signified team. Indy, as you'll see in a second, is the interviewer on screen, and then I'm going to invite Indy and Mateo from eMarketer up on stage, and we're going to talk a little bit more broadly around LATAM. But firstly, we want to share some of what Walmart's been doing, in Mexico. I mean, to some of Juliana's research slides and the importance of things like, payments and such. We think this was a really fascinating, of Blas to be able to share some of the Walmart Mexico story over the past, 18 months. So let's roll with that.
Hi, Guelph team. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Blas Caraballo, someone we've had the pleasure of working with over the last 2 years at Walmart Mexico. Blas is the VP of Financial Services and Digital Payments for one of the fastest growing parts of the Walmart portfolio globally, and has an incredible vantage point of all the innovation happening across e-commerce in Mexico. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do, Blas, please share a little bit about your journey. I'm sure the audience would love to hear from you.
Yes, hi. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Well, as you mentioned, I have been 13 years in the e-commerce and digital payments space in Mexico, always based in Mexico City. First, I spent since 2007 to 2010, 3 years in e-commerce for an airline. Then I spent 10 years for PayPal Mexico, marketing, merchant services, and in the last couple of years, general manager of PayPal Mexico. And 18 months ago, March of 2020, I think that everyone remembers what we were doing in March because it's when the pandemic started. I moved to Walmart. And as you mentioned, I'm the VP of Financial Services and Digital Payments. I have spent 18 months, building and accelerating this ecosystem in Walmart, which is very interesting, and we have a lot of fun.
Amazing. Thank you, Blas, for joining us today. And I think it's going to be a great perspective. So speaking of March of 2020, as you pointed out, you joined Walmart right as the pandemic was creating a surge in demand for the e-commerce channel. Obviously, stores were closed, people couldn't go. Talk us through a little bit about what that moment was like, how Walmart Mexico reacted over the subsequent months, especially given Mexico overall was earlier in its e-commerce evolution when the pandemic started.
Yes, you're right. March of 2020. First, let me give you a quick background also on the Mexico market. Since I have been on e-commerce in Mexico since 2007, to be also very open, from 2007 to March of 2020, there was a lot of development also in the Mexican market, and a lot of progress. Compared with other Latin American countries, Mexico was behind, and during those 10, 13 years, there was a lot of development on e-commerce, on the platforms, on payments, on delivery. So in March 2020, there is still, and there was a lot to do, but also a lot of progress was done, and Mexico was moving forward, to be one of the leading countries in e-commerce in Latin America. Talking specifically on Walmart, before the pandemic, also Walmart has been doing a lot of investment since 2017, 2018 on omni-channel and building the digital ecosystem. but yeah, no one probably expected that in 1 month they're gonna be growth of 300%, from 1 month to the other, and we saw those type of growth, and we closed 2020 with a strong growth above 115. That 150, sorry, that those were growth that we were expecting maybe in 3, 4, 5 years. So there was also I think the company was prepared, but a lot was needed, and needed to be done also to reach the service and where Walmart wanted to be. So during the first months, for example, if we look into the service and NPS, it was challenging, but also there was a lot of work, a lot of adaptation. And now, for example, just to give you, a sense of the numbers, if we look into NPS, we can see that it's higher to the numbers prior to the pandemic. So that's really good. It's because a lot of work was done. And this year we continue to grow very fast. We have a strong 2020 base, but also the growth continued to be really fast on this month, on 2021.
Blas, thank you for that perspective, and more importantly, congrats on all the process build out and the huge amount of work it takes to get NPS above 2019 levels. My understanding is a big part of that customer satisfaction came from building out your omni-channel capabilities. So click to collect or click and collect pickup, home delivery with credit card payment on delivery, and a variety of other innovations that just made Walmart top of mind for Mexican shoppers. Maybe talk through some of the operational work that went into creating those experiences and what that's meant from a consumer experience and payments perspective.
Yes, if we talk specifically, about the customers, what we can see that they switched to e-commerce not because they wanted, they just switched because there was no option. In March of 2020, March or April 2020, there was not many options. So what they discovered, they were exploring, and they discovered that there were challenges, but there was also a great service. It was a service that was convenient, that it was secure. And what we saw also that many of them, at the end of the day, they become omni-channel clients. And that's one of the differentiator that we as a company, that Walmart as a company has. Because, if you want to buy online, but you want to go to the store and pick up at the store because no one is at home or whatever reason you have, you can do it, and as you mentioned, the operation team work, on having this experience working well. But if you want to buy online, pay online, and get, your products, the typical e-commerce delivered at home, that also works. But at Walmart, we also offer, some of the customers the possibility, if you want to buy online, it's the first time that you are buying online, the customer is not sure about, sharing, not sharing because the information is always secure, but, including or putting the information online. So you can buy online, you can get delivered at your home, and when you get delivered, you can pay with your credit card. So those were all options that Walmart as a company was giving, to the clients as a way to help them, to do this switch from offline to online. That, as we discussed, it was, it's not an option. It was mandatory at that moment. There was not too many options. And it worked well. And many of them like that experience, like the possibilities that they have. One other of the things that we work, for example, was Walmart has a kiosk at stores, so you are able, to go to the store, buy at the kiosk. When you have an extended catalog, you can pay there, and then you can, get delivered also, for example, at your house. So now, it's for sure that nothing will be the same. It's a lot of changes. And we need to adapt.
Right.
And we believe that we need to continue to offer the clients all these possibilities, on this omni-channel experience.
No, it's a powerful point, and certainly offering endless aisle in a store kiosk experience is a pretty cool adaptation to kind of the needs of the shoppers locally. I mean, zooming out, all of this represents a huge amount of catch up on state of the art in e-commerce in Mexico. It also, now that we're 18 months into this journey, it represents long-term behavior shift for the consumer. So curious for your perspective on how consumers have adapted as this new mode has crystallized, right? After a year and a half. What are you seeing as stores reopen? What is the mix, as you said, of e-commerce only versus in-store versus omni-channel? And, you know, what surprised you about those changes?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, as I was mentioned before, the first thing is that many of these customers, they did it not because they wanted, but because there was no option. So, but saying that, there is a new normality, and this in this new normality, many of these clients, they try different experience, they try different things, and they know, as I mentioned, okay, this is an omni-channel experience. It's not just a 100% digital experience. So, trying to give them that experience, and trying, to offer an outstanding experience, I think it's critical. Now consumers, after all these months, they are much more demanding on service. They are much demanding on products. They are much on delivering on the promise that if you are going to deliver in 3 hours, they are expecting to be delivered in 3 hours. So I think that's the critical point. To see how we can deliver on our promise, and working on that. Now, surprise, I think there were many surprises during the year. And probably one thing that if I have to mention is, okay, this was like a forced change, but I think, and this is more a personal point, but yes, I was surprised on how fast, we saw this move from an offline experience to an online experience, and how much the clients like it, in our case, because, or in the Walmart case, because it's giving a really good experience, and we can see that on the NPS. But many of these clients, they try the online experience, and they will continue to do it. Probably not in 100% of the time, but they will continue to do this omni-channel experience.
For sure. I think we're seeing that type of behavior globally, and thanks for validating that it's the same with Mexican shoppers. What you're highlighting as well is how much kind of financial technology is transforming everyday consumer experiences. And obviously, given your background in PayPal and other places, you've helped shape that journey. Would love to hear your take on what this means for e-commerce payments, optimizing kind of revenue and conversion opportunities as consumer behavior shifts to omnichannel.
Yeah, I think first, let me also give you, some background on Mexico. As many people know, big part of the population is underserved on the financial standpoint. Mexico has a population of 120 million, around 120 million, and there are 30 million credit cards. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge if you have, for a digital experience. So one of the things, for example, that is critical here in Mexico is to pay at store, that you go online, you buy online, you do not make the payment, you print the page, and you go. And we have all this network of stores where we are giving the clients this possibility to do it, and that's important when you have a client that probably they don't want, they do not have a credit card, or they do not want to use a debit card. The second one point that for us is very important, it's, I mentioned, pay at delivery, that you can buy online, and you say, okay, I'm not going to buy now. Once that I receive, my products at home. I'm gonna pay with my credit and my debit card. So the person who is, delivering the products, he checks the terminal, and that's more related with security, because at the end of the day, they have an electronic payment card, but they don't want to put that information online. And then the other important thing, it's also, here in Mexico, we have for a long period, what we call installments. That is very similar to something that now is, everyone talks about, that is BNPL, buy now, pay later, But in Mexico, we had it many times. So working, with our financial partners to give or the credit card owners the possibility to have these promotions is very critical also in the market. And the last one that we saw also during these months is also there was in the mix, many people start to use debit card, and having and allowing them to use credit card. It was very important. And all this, let's take into account the challenge that we have related to conversion, and by conversion I mean acceptance and also losses, how we can improve and how we can continue to improve our acceptance rate, and also to reduce our losses. But a lot of progress was done in the last couple of years also in Mexico, and also specifically in Walmart. And the last one that I would like to mention is also, some things that we work specifically at the store. For example, contactless payment. In the last couple of months, Walmart here in Mexico has an app that we call Cashi, that's called Cashi, in where you are able to top up, your account on Cashi, and then you are able to pay, with your credit or your debit card, and you are able to pay at the store, or you can also do some bill payments, and that's also part of, in this pandemic or in this circumstance, that help us a lot, with experience with our customers.
Oh, that's great, Blas. Thank you. What I'm hearing is a wide range of tactics to offer trust to the consumer, offer convenience, and really make it easy for them to transact online digitally, even if they hadn't done that previously, and even if they may not have a credit card. So that makes a lot of sense.
Paying online is safe, that there are many ways to do it. Not only you need to have a credit card, you can also pay with a debit card. So you should try it, and you should see that it's safe, to pay online.
Perfect. Thank you, Blas, for all the perspectives and for educating the consumer. It's been amazing working with you over the last year and a half on both that acceptance rate and that loss reduction objective. So with that, we'll take some of the learnings you just shared with us and discuss it with our friends at eMarketer live in the venue. Thank you, Blas.
Oh, thank you, Indy. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, let me welcome Indy and Mateo to the stage. Great. Let's do some quick, self-introductions. Indy, would you like to start, even though everyone has now seen you on screen for the last 15 minutes?
Yeah, I was making a mental note to shave before being on HD larger than life next time. But anyway, hi, Indy Guha. I lead marketing and partnerships at Signified and have the pleasure of working with Walmart in Mexico.
Hi there, Mateo Cervelos. I am senior analyst covering Latin America and Spain at eMarketer. We do market research and media publications about the latest and greatest in digital transformation.
Well, wonderful to have you both here. We want to talk about Latin America kind of in general, but coming off of, the interview with Blas, again, I thought he was very insightful, very articulate in terms of, what they had to do at Walmart over the past year. So, Indy, I wondered if you had, some of these thoughts around, okay, what does this mean to the market in Mexico now? They have effectively raised the bar, whether that's from a consumer expectation, as you said, you say three-day, shipping, they expect, 3-day shipping, right? And so, what does this mean, for say, retailers and brands, from the U.S. who are perhaps looking at the Mexican market?
I would say it's a fantastic development, to be honest. The conclusion you should be taking from the discussion is not that you need Walmart's store footprint to serve the Mexican shopper. It does mean some of the other capabilities that Blas highlighted are going to be very relevant, such as finding local delivery partners who can support pay on delivery, because Mexican shoppers may not be at a place where they're willing to input their credit card information online in their first experience with a particular retail environment. But overall, I think it made the market much more addressable from a cross-border perspective, because now a much wider universe of shoppers are accustomed to e-commerce, many of whom have added credit cards rather to their households. But I don't know if Mateo, you have a different take on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's been a fascinating journey to see everything play out over the past 18 months, and covering it from a data perspective. We're constantly being barraged with 300% growth this month, 200% growth that month. But when we take a step back and actually look at the entirety of 2020, Mexico itself was in the top 10 fastest growing markets globally, growth rate over 65%. And it's just been a fascinating journey to see how these companies have innovated. And Latin America is very prone to many crises, be it political, economical. And during these times, you usually see companies reduce investments in a lot of these innovative processes. But really what we saw that is, in spite of all of these economic calamities, store closures, we saw such rapid growth and a pivoting of budgets towards the development of e-commerce and e-commerce capabilities, be it across the payments, financial services, shipping, omni-channel. And it's now becoming such a competitive environment where the consumer is now in charge to say, I am now better informed, I have more options, and I'm now going to choose which retailer or which brand gives me the best user experience possible to then make my purchase and spend my money with. And that applies to locally in the domestic market as well as cross-border brands trying to get in.
So Mateo, keep going a little bit in terms of, as the lead analyst, for Latin America, what's your outlook for both Mexico and then, maybe you can talk about LATAM in general, and, where are you expecting to see growth? Are we going to come scaling back a little bit from the highs that we've seen over the past year, or do you expect there's a stickiness to that consumer behavior now?
Definitely, and that's a great question that we often get asked quite a lot. With 2020, so much growth was pulled forward that the initial expectation coming into 2021 was, okay, we might see it taper off a little bit as stores reopen. We should expect maybe to slow down. But as we've seen, analyzing company data, consumer behavior data, it's really the momentum has kept on going. And even despite that pushing forward, it's still seen strong double-digit growth, and we're still expecting a very strong e-commerce year. And as we ramp up into now the last quarter of the year, which is the most, I'd say, important quarter for any brand or retailer's bottom line, all indicators point to a very healthy e-commerce boom to continue.
I mean, that's exciting because I think, we have seen, a lot of promise of, Latin American e-commerce, growth in past years, and all of a sudden, boom, it's here. Indy, I mean, you guys, have always been very generous in sharing a lot of your global data. So I'm just kind of curious, what you guys are seeing, LATAM versus, other regions in the world, and what does that mean in terms of, again, things like, omni-channel and where that's going to lie?
For sure. I think, got a little loud there. Totally agree with Mateo that the growth has been impressive and the habits are here to stay. LATAM e-commerce growth outpaced the Europe, as you might imagine, given a lower starting baseline. And within that, I think omnichannel has certainly been a big part of it. But the opportunity is wider, I think, for a lot of Latin American digital shoppers, affinities are being formed now. And omnichannel is simply the convenience angle that can help create a habit, but there's an opportunity for brand affinity that goes broader than that. What I'd point out is because these e-commerce experiences, these stacks have emerged so quickly, for those of you in the room, don't underestimate the amount of low-hanging fruit in optimizing that shopper journey. In talking to folks, to merchants in LATAM, I liken it to the good and the bad is triple the US. So in the US, we expect payment conversion and authorization rates. If 100 people hit buy, 95 get through. In LATAM, if you hit 65% authorization rate, that's heroic. So just think about the amount of ceiling in tuning how you handle checkout, for example. Conversely, fraud rates in the US hover around 0.8 to 1% of transaction volume. In LATAM, anything under 2.5% is fantastic. So, and those are linked, right? If you think about what Blas was talking about, the high fraud rates drive consumer reluctance to use their credit cards online. So if you can tie those together, there's so much growth to be had in the existing funnel, in addition to the habit formation that Matteo and you referenced.
You know, Indy, what's your take on the cross-border opportunity? I mean, obviously what Blas and team are able to do on the ground in Mexico, I mean, you know, with all the advantages of the 2,500 stores that they have and, you know, and so on. Does this kind of, you know, provide a window of opportunity perhaps, you know, for cross-border e-commerce for U.S. brands selling into Mexico?
Absolutely. I think, as is always the case with the cross-border decision, it comes down to the affinity and the strength of your brand. If you have a following in that market, then a lot of your marketing is done for you. Maybe you've had historical wholesale distribution deals, and there's a chance to overlay digital on top. But certainly, it feels like we're at a tipping point with credit card adoption, growing comfort with e-commerce, and local supply chain and delivery infrastructure catching up to whatever you're trying to do as a brand. And there's some amazing cross-border platforms here today, many of whom we work with from a payments and checkout optimization perspective that can round out that stack for you.
You know, we've always thought of markets with very low e-commerce penetration where you need to do a lot of hand-holding, you know, with the consumers. Effectively, what this past year has done is it's kind of really rushed us through that hand-holding period. So now you have a whole group of, you know, willing, you know, consumers out there that you know, perhaps, you know, are seeking, again, you know, unique product. Let's talk about payments a little bit and fintech because, you know, certainly we've seen this, you know, from a number of research, you know, data points, you know, Juliana just showed, you know, around the importance of, you know, having the right, you know, payments. Matteo, let's start with you. I mean, you know, obviously this is something that, you know, you're watching closely. Tell us, you know, about, you know, what are some of the issues and challenges that you guys are seeing, you know, from a payments perspective in LATAM?
Definitely, and I think the last panel also spoke to that as well. It's just, you know, the amount of options. And if you look at a case in point like a Walmart, they have a wide variety of different options, whether you want to pay online, pay in store, pay with cash, pay with, you know, with a contactless card, pay with an app. So there are a lot of, the challenge is also how do you address that? And for a lot of retailers, you know, it's figuring out what systems do they need in place to hit all of those different touch points and in order to effectively create a seamless checkout experience, be it online or in the store itself. The second one is just the issue of underbanked or unbanked consumers in general. You have a huge swath of the population, many of whom had come online for the first time right now during this pandemic, and weren't able to take part in that digital economy. But now what you're effectively seeing is a lot of these major players, be it retailers or e-commerce companies, are also taking on that role as fintech provider as well. You look at big players, Mercado Libre with Mercado Pago, Rappi with Rappi Pay, Walmart with Cashi. So you now then see, rather than having this traditional financial services sector, you're now seeing the big players themselves taking on the role of fintech provider, as well as logistics provider, as well as becoming this one-stop shop for consumers to effectively serve and address all of their needs.
Indy, I mean, anything to add to that? I mean, what you guys are seeing, obviously from, payments and just, again, getting those good orders through.
I think Matteo captured it really well. The challenge for some of the direct-to-consumer brands or cross-border initiatives that might be reflected in this room is obviously you don't have access to the same level of shopper data that a Walmart does. And so I think then the question becomes, how do you replicate that pre-existing shopper knowledge and insight in whatever technology stack you build out? But certainly you have to figure out how to accept some of the payment methods that Matteo was referring to make sure that you get the highest possible conversion rate in your e-commerce experience.
So let's just kind of, wrap up on a little, what are you watching? What are the trends that, others should be kind of aware of, certainly in Latin America, as we, again, try to make this potential a reality? Matteo, what are you kind of watching? What are some key indicators that perhaps our audience, should be aware of?
I'd say there are two key indicators that I'm personally looking at. Definitely the demographic shifts of this, of who these new buyers are, some of whom could tend to trend a little older on the spectrum, as well as others outside of major metropolitan areas. So that's now creating a whole host of opportunity, but also challenges for brands, local brands and international brands selling into that market, and how to address that market. These new first-time buyers have different needs. They have a different set of digital maturity. They're coming online most likely for the first time. Mobile devices. They may not necessarily be using the app. But then that leads me to the second thing I'm watching closely is then the fulfillment process of that. If you have remote consumers outside of the major areas, now you have to figure out, is my logistics partner able to serve that market? How do I innovate to then live up to my promise of, say, fast shipping, but also then have fast shipping mean outside of remote areas? So now the interesting trend that I'm looking at is how these companies are ramping up these efforts, be it with drone deliveries, with bikes, other players launching airplane services to get these products really within a quick amount of time. So it's fascinating to see the innovation, the rapid pace to serve that addressable market.
Very cool. India, how about yourself? Again, and where does LATAM fit, again, relative to the rest of the world? I mean, what are you seeing from a lot of your clients?
We are being rapidly pulled across LATAM by several of those clients, including Walmart. And I think that reflects the consumer opportunity that Matteo touched on. I would say the biggest trend or the biggest kind of low-hanging fruit opportunities, what we touched on earlier, this authorization rate challenge. Think about how much more you could invest in marketing to this growing demographic of first-time shoppers who want to build affinities with your brand if your payments layer led through 90% of transaction attempts instead of 70% of transaction attempts. Reacquiring that user when there's that much friction in checkout is the biggest limiter on building brand affinity in LATAM e-commerce as it stands today. So I'd say that's the metric to watch. That's the metric to hold your teams accountable to.
I mean, that sounds like that's the revenue, optimization, kind of almost the low-hanging fruit. I don't know if it's low-hanging though. Is that, I mean, there's lots of challenges behind what you just said to raise that authorization, rate. But anything else that you want to add to that?
Selfishly, I would say we get to see a lot of the population in these markets because of customers like Walmart, and every other customer we work with benefits from that network effect. So that does help with better decisioning and driving up that authorization rate.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time here, so we're going to just wrap up. But I want to thank you, both of you, for again, being able to join us here today. Again, Indy, thank you very, very much for doing the interview with Blast. I thought he was wonderful, and again, thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.